Go ahead and start off with the third step prayer there, Rob, if you would help us, please.
I certainly will. I'm Rob Kay, recovered alcoholic, and we're going to do the third step prayer, which is on page 63 of your big book. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Perfect. Okay. Well, we are on page 108, and we were just getting ready to look at the different types of, I think the husbands in here for four different categories, but we can obviously four different types of partners. Um, um, what we'll do is go ahead and just start off with the problem with which you struggle usually falls within one of these four categories. All right. Thanks, Rob.
Okay, right at the bottom of page 108, everybody. The problem with which you struggle usually falls within one of four categories. One, your husband may be only a heavy drinker. His drinking may be constant, or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. Perhaps he spends too much money for liquor. It may be slowing him up mentally and physically, but he does not see it. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. He is positive he can handle liquor, that it does him no harm, that drinking is necessary in his business. He would probably be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. This world is full of people like him. Some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep on, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while.
Yeah, and there's some good discussion about this. Heavy drinkers, they may tend to do fine during the week, for example, and this is just one type scenario. They don't drink during the week, and then they kind of do a lot of drinking on the weekends, especially if it happens to be a games or sports that they want to watch, participate in, and or they just uh, there are activities around the house, maybe working in the yard, that type of thing, and they just do that. Others are just sporadic from time to time. They'll actually drink too much, and then there's others that drink daily and would, you know, two, three, four, five drinks a day. But again, one of the things that kind of differentiates them from a true alcoholic, as they put it here, is the fact that they can moderate and or stop altogether if a sufficient reason comes up for them to do so. So I think it's really kind of an important kind of distinction here. On the outside looking in, it might look like that this person's an alcoholic, but if they can moderate and for an extended period of time, or if they can stop altogether, there's definitely some control over their drinking, and having that kind of control is definitely something that I wouldn't say disqualifies, but just doesn't qualify them as a true alcoholic, albeit, a lot of people that drink heavily over time continue to drink more and more, as we've talked about in the past, with regard to aging and alcohol and the fact that our metabolism slows down. If you continue to take in the same amount of alcohol, obviously that just continues to get worse and worse and worse. And at some point, you're at a tipping point, and you find yourself not able to control it anymore, and therefore becoming alcoholic. Rob?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you can go to page 34 and check on lost power to choose. And remember here it says some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep on, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while. So please keep that in mind. Now, let's go to number two. Your husband is showing lack of control, for he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. He often gets entirely out of hand when drinking. He admits this is true, but is positive that he will do better. He has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry. Maybe he is beginning to lose his friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried at times and is becoming aware that he cannot drink like other people. He sometimes drinks in the morning and throughout the day also, to hold his nervousness in check. He is remorseful after serious drinking bouts, tells you he wants to stop. When he gets over this spree, he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time. We think this person is in danger. These are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. Perhaps he can still tend to business fairly well. He has by no means ruined everything. As we say among ourselves, he wants to want to stop.
Yeah, there's kind of one of the I put an asterisk by this particular one is that for a long time this was me. I was not able to necessarily control my drinking. I probably showed some signs of stopping, but not because I wanted to, because I either ran out of alcohol or the time ran out. Or I started to get into what I call either the brownout or the blackouts, and obviously at that point I was down for the count. But um, during this type of for this type, some of the things that we've talked about here is that they show a lack of control. They get into trouble. Consequences rise up, and everybody seems to be impacted by them. And but then again, they're able to get up the next day, probably don't feel very good, and kind of function. And I guess the word function there is another thing that we could also perhaps label. I wouldn't say necessarily that it's hard and fast, but this is kind of the idea of a functional alcoholic, in that they are drinking at almost every chance they get. They don't have control over it, but they are able to at least kind of white knuckle it for a period of time in order to be able to do their job, uh, do a particular task or function, but they're not necessarily that much fun to be around. And as it says here, they may start to lose friends. The person starts to potentially isolate a little bit, and withdraw because people are questioning them about their drinking. Usually, a loved one or somebody close to them might say, "Hey, Leo, are you sure you want another drink? Are you sure you want that, that next beer kind of thing? You sure are drinking a lot, that type of thing." And yes, it does cause some irritation with the person that's doing the drinking. So, having said all of that, I think that it says this person is in danger. Um, it seems to me that we've kind of crossed that line already here. So we're in that dark gray area, if you will, and I think that this person is pretty much on their way, if not already there, with regards to being an alcoholic. But um, there's also here is that they've started to recognize it. And that was one of those things that everybody's got a little bit of a buffer in there where they've recognized that they've got a problem. They want to either control their drinking or try to get back to being normal, or at least what they thought was normal. And they're not able to do that, but they still, are trying to do that. Or the other part of it is this the other obsession that we talk about is that to be able to stop and stay stopped, and in doing so, it makes it difficult. But they're still drinking, so we haven't quite crossed the line of they're doing everything possible. They just don't have that inner strength to be able to stop. Rob?
Beautiful, Leo. He is remorseful after serious drinking bouts. When, in the doctor's opinion, he talked about, they're ever remorseful, after a drinking, vowing never to do it again. Talked about that in the doctor's opinion. And, the problem is this person has not admitted step one. They still think that, the obsession, takes over and says, next time it'll be different. I'll be able to control and enjoy my drinking. But we know, because we have smashed the idea, we have conceded to our innermost selves that we're alcoholic. What are we conceding to? That we have the allergy, that we take any alcohol whatsoever into our body, we can't control the amount. And two, it's that our mind tells us it's going to be different this time. You'll be able to handle it. You'll be okay. You know? And so this is what the problem is with this drinker right here is that, if we can get to them when they're remorseful, we can do something. It's when the obsession takes over again and they think that they can control and enjoy their drinking again. And then, oh no, I just going through a rough patch. Leo was talking about frothy emotional appeal. People around us see a problem, but we don't because our mind keeps telling us, you're making too much of it. You're making too much of a big deal about it. You're going to be okay. You know what? It was just a bad night. You know what? But the bad nights add up after a while. And then we have to look back on our drinking careers. And that's why we call it a career, is that we look back on it and go, is it really worth it? Is it really worth all the problems, all the consequences? Because the consequences add up. That's what gets our attention. Let's go to number 3. The husband has gone much further than husband number 2. So once like number 2, he became worse. His friends have slipped away. His home is a near wreck, and he cannot hold a position. Maybe the doctor has been called in, and the weary round of sanitariums and hospitals has begun. He admits he cannot drink like other people, but does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. He may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop but cannot. His case presents additional questions, which we shall try to answer for you. You can be quite hopeful of a situation like this.
Yeah, this is the baffling side of things where the individual is more than fully aware of the fact that they have a real drinking problem, that they really want to stop, but they just don't understand alcoholism and how it has a hold of you, and and are unable to stop. Things are worse. This person is probably near drunk all the time now, and is at least clearly understands and admits the fact that they can't drink like other people anymore, that they've lost control of their ability to stop drinking, and they are desperate to try and get to stop, but they still don't know how or why or what. So it makes it a very difficult thing. Um, they become, as I just said, desperate, and and wants to stop. We will look at this person as being kind of, it's an extension of of two, but point is that this is a person that is completely lost control, near drunk all the time, wants to stop but can't, and doesn't understand why. Right?
And this is a perfect opportunity to get this person a little bit of humility. I don't know how to stop. They're looking for answers. They've tried everything, self knowledge, they've tried willpower. Nothing seems to work. And as Leo said, they're baffled. They don't know what to do. They're looking for answers. That's where we can come in because we have a solution. We know what the answer is in this book right here. Well, they're at the place where they're looking for another way. Yeah. Type 4. You may have had a husband of whom you completely despair. He has been placed in one institution after another. He is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. Sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. Perhaps he has had delirium tremens. Doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. Maybe you have already been obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well.
Yeah, so we're looking at somebody that in today's the way we approach it, they've been into multiple rehab facilities. They've tried to get sober and stay sober, but they've got that inability to do so because they haven't quite learned all there is to know about alcoholism. They haven't been able to tap into that higher power, and doing so, find themselves repeating over and over, going to rehab. It's really a frustrating and very kind of dark place to be, because it just seems impossible, and nothing seems to be working, and you think that 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 they're down for the count. Point here is another thing that they talk about, and having him committed. We don't necessarily do that anymore. That's a different time and place, but nonetheless, longer and longer stays at rehab facilities can get, well. Part of it is that they may or may not work. They do a very good job of drying somebody out for a period of time. They give them some tools to work with, but it just depends on the individual and how ready and willing they are to adopt a program such as what we're prescribing here with AA and its solution, as to whether or not they're going to have that quote spiritual experience and be able to dig deep inside and find that inner strength that they're looking for in order to be able to stop and partner uh, with their higher power. This is a really, things have fallen apart. The job's been lost. They probably are in a dark room, and the family is walking on eggshells. They are trying to avoid, and so it's a rough time. It's a really, really rough time for both the individual that is obviously alcoholic and the family and friends around them. Rob?
Yes, you know, most of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well. They recovered. Remember, this book all the way through talks about recovered. We were never cured of alcoholism, but what we have is a daily reprieve contingent on our spiritual connection. So they become recovered. This husband, okay, or this person, because let's be honest, two wives is really two spouses, a male and female. You know, he is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. You know what? We had a case earlier in a book where they talked about 6 times they went to see this guy, and each time they explained alcoholism. They laughed, which I didn't care for much. You know why? Because they understood exactly what was going on with this poor guy. They hit bottom. They want help. They're willing to do anything at this point. And we come in, we can give them the answer. We can give them a program of action that can get them back to normal or to get them to live a sober life. Let's now get back to husband number one. Oddly enough, he is often difficult to deal with. He enjoys drinking. It stirs his imagination. His friends feel closer over a highball. Perhaps you enjoy drinking with him yourself when he doesn't go too far. You have passed happy evenings together, chatting and drinking before you're fired. Perhaps you both like parties, which would be dull without liquor. We have enjoyed such evenings ourselves. We had a good time. We know about liquor as a social lubricant. Some, but not all of us, think it has its advantages when reasonably used.
Yeah, and that's, we're talking here. It looks kind of pleasant. Perhaps you enjoy drinking with him yourself when he doesn't go too far. Obviously, I can see this where you are, drinking with him. You're somewhat, I think this is where the approach I've seen is that they drink with you, but they try to control your drinking. So they kind of just say, hey, let's just have one more, or let's not have the next a lot, another drink. I'm fine. Aren't you fine? That type of thing. And that kind of, you can tell and feel, and that you're being, what's the right word? Trying to be controlled, I think, is the right word here, and that makes it tough. But nonetheless, this is just one of those deals where you've got somebody that is at risk of making a fool of themselves, embarrassing others, etc. And but at the same time is is still at that point that they can control, even if they get a little irritated when you try to control. Rob?
Yeah, a lot of times, we can't think of a life without drinking. How can we get together with people and not have a drink? How can, you have a wedding without alcohol? Uh, you know, how can I play hockey and then after the game not have a drink at the end? You know what? You can. You can. It's just a question of, you know what? You don't drink anymore. You find these things out later on, but at the beginning, it's hard to imagine because this is something you've done all through your life, your adult life. You enjoy drinking with other people, but now it's got to the point where you can't just take one drink. It always gets out of hand. You know, we talked about four types here. The type one was the heavy drinker. Type two was the lack of control. Type three was wants to stop but cannot. Type four was starts having medical problems. Well, we never talked about type five. Type five is dead from alcoholism. That's the scary part. Top of page 111, everybody. The first principle of success is that you should never be angry. Even though your husband becomes unbearable and you have to leave him temporarily, you should, if you can, go without rancor. Patience and good temper are most necessary.
Yeah, this is tough. We all suffer from the human condition, which is makes it difficult to not feel those emotions that sometimes could be coupled with anger. But it doesn't do anybody any good. If you get angry with the heavy drinker and or the alcoholic, all they do is reciprocate and get angry back. And then everybody's lost the intent and or the positive outcome that could come from having been patient and accommodating to the point that you're not bending over backwards necessarily, but to the point that you're trying to be supportive and show a good attitude towards the whole thing. Positive always seems to help when you're trying to deal with the alcoholic and or the heavy drinker. Again, remember the heavy drinker is able to moderate or stop if given sufficient reasons why. Sometimes it's enough just to appeal to them in a positive way and getting them to stop. So uh,
You know,
basically,
there,
go
oh,
ahead,
sorry.
Rob.
No,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, we have spiritual tools that we have been taught, which helps us in situations. What do we do when we feel fear? We pray and we ask God to remove that fear. If we feel jealousy, any emotion, the sick man prayer or the master resentment prayer, we have spiritual tools. You know, the first principle of success is that you should never be angry. And this is Al-Anon, you know, way before Al-Anon was even invented. So try not to be angry. Wow, how do you do that? Your husband or your significant other makes a fool of themselves, and you got to sit back and not get angry. Boy, patience, tolerance, understanding, and love. That is you know right there, and it's an incredible way to be able to deal with it. You know, wow. Our next thought is that you should never tell him what he must do about his drinking. If he gets the idea that you are a nagger or killjoy, your chance of accomplishing anything useful may be zero. He will use that as an excuse to drink more. He will tell you he is misunderstood. This may lead to lonely evenings for you. He may seek someone else to console him. not always another man.
Yeah. So kind of the thing to think about here is that anybody that starts to put pressure on somebody that's a heavy drinker, an alcoholic, it almost without fail they push back, and a lot of them will get the heck it's if you're going to get mad at me, I'm just going to drink, or I'll show you, I'm going to drink, and that they're still fighting the idea that they can somehow control their drinking, or that their drinking isn't a problem, it's everybody else. And I got to that point at one at a time in my drinking, and that was as I just looked at everybody else and was thinking, if you just leave me alone, everything will be fine. You're the one causing the problems, not me. I'm just drinking. How can I be the one causing problems because I'm doing what I want to do and I'm enjoying doing it? And here you are telling me that I shouldn't, and that's a problem. Um, and I have in the past, been pushed to the point that I said, like I said, the oh heck it's, and I just started drinking more, and it was in basically saying, I'll show you, and there I was. It never ended good. It always ended badly. So um, it just nagging or putting a lot of pressure on somebody is just going to backfire. Rob?
As our friend Leo, as our friend Bill always from New Jersey always says, we drink at people. You make me mad, I'm gonna
Yep.
drink at you, and this is something, you know, here we go again with a beautiful line for Al-Anon. You know, our next thought is that you should never tell him what he must do. Detach. You know, beautifully put. And as I said, this is way before Al-Anon. You know, so it's a great way. This may lead to lonely evenings for you. Yeah, because they're in their cups. And you're sitting there all by yourself wanting to spend time. You know, Bill and Lois. Let's talk about Bill and Lois for a minute. Well, he was out at, going to play golf, and then on Armistice Day, 1934, and gets drunk. Lois is waiting, she worked all day and is waiting at home for him, thinking that he's gone golfing, only to find him the next morning, he had fallen down, cut up in his head, clutching his golf clubs, drunk. How she must have felt. How many evenings she sat at home waiting for Bill to come home, and he never showed up. It's so difficult, but they talk about in Al-Anon, they always talk about detaching. It's not your fault, not your responsibility. All these things. Be determined that your husband's drinking is not going to spoil your relations with your children or your friends. They need your companionship and your help. It is possible to have a full and useful life, though your husband continues to drink. We know women who are unafraid, even happy under these conditions. Do not set your heart on reforming your husband. You may be unable to do so, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah, I think that this is again a situation. As long as you've got the person that's able to continue to hold down a job, they are pleasant at times, and that type of thing. I think the person can be happy, but at the same time, I think that this is also probably a rare case that the partner, the spouse, the other spouse, the non-alcoholic spouse, is truly happy under the circumstances, but they do put up a facade, and I think that they start to try and they manage the relationships, and that's a chore. After a while, it gets to be kind of difficult. But I would say that like I said, the women who are unafraid, even happy under these conditions, I think that if you were to ask them if they're truly happy, they probably would tell you not exactly. They wish that their husband drank less or their spouse drank less, and that things weren't quite so, things didn't require managing quite so much. Um, but at the same time, as hard as you try, as they say here, you may be unable to do so, no matter how hard you try. Rob?
Leo, in the probably next week, we'll be in the family afterwards. And in the family afterwards, one of the hard things for the alcoholic husband is to reintegrate himself into the family life. The people, the rest of the family go on living their life. Well, we sit in the basement drinking. Okay, they go on with their lives. The kids have activities if they're young. And what they do is they start leaving you out of the picture and they just do things. When we get sober, we have to reintegrate ourselves into the family. Okay, you know, and that takes some effort because remember, the family has just gone on living their lives and doing what they have to do and not expecting you to partake because you might be too drunk to go or to become involved. So that's going to take some effort. So, as I say, we'll get into that in the family afterwards. But right here it's talking about get on with your life. For the other half, get on with your life, live it, enjoy it. We know these suggestions are sometimes difficult to follow, but you will save many a heartbreak if you can succeed in observing them. Your husband may come to appreciate your reasonableness and patience. This may lay the groundwork for a friendly talk about his alcoholic problem. Try to have him bring up the subject himself. Be sure you are not critical during such a discussion. Attempt instead to put yourself in his place. Let him see that you want to be helpful rather than critical.
Yeah, so this is, you've heard me say in the past, and this is some techniques in order to just really to get where you want to be from point A to point B, and that is first of all focus on the individual. Okay, so put yourself in his place. That's focusing on them and not yourself. You persuade through involvement. You may come to appreciate your reasonableness and patience, and this may lay the groundwork for a friendly talk about his alcoholic problem. That's basically persuading them through involvement, and then earning the right to advance is obviously is having that discussion, getting to that point where you can have a amicable discussion that's positive, and maybe they're being receptive under the circumstances because they don't feel threatened or anything like that. So really, we've covered those three areas where you get that person to where you want them to be, and that is to be able to seriously and honestly discuss something in a positive manner. First of all, you focus on them, then you earn the or persuade them through involvement, and then you earn the right to advance and talk about it. So this is a perfect paragraph to bring those three elements up. And there are three elements to really to anything in life. If you want to if you really want to get to from point A to point B, it's always good to see what you can do for the other person, and that kind of lends itself to our step 12, and that is to be of service to other people. And ultimately, what you're doing is keeping yourself sober. And I'm digressing here, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about in regards to moving in that direction. So this is a perfect example of that. Rob?
Bill wrote four times in in the family Bible that he was through with drinking forever. And Lois, at those times, Lois must have felt great joy that finally, you know, we're moving on. That things will get back to well, whatever normal is for everybody. But and then when he went to Towns Hospital, you know, and he'd come out and he'd be sober for a short period of time. Then for her to talk to Dr. Silkworth and find out that, And Dr. Silk were telling her that, if Bill keeps going the way he's going, in a year he'll be in a sanitarium with a wet brain. And what we put people through. It's amazing that they stick with it. I've been married 43 years. And you know what?
Wow.
It says in the book that alcoholics marry the finest women, and we certainly do. And you know, I know this chapter was written by Bill, and that for all the Al-Anon suggestions that are in this are just detach, and the patience that we expect of our spouse that they have to go through while we're in our cups, hoping that one day we'll rise out of our lethargy. You know, I got to give my wife a hug later on. Just thank her for being with me.
Absolutely.
We're right on the bottom of page 111, the last line. When a discussion does arise, you might suggest you read this book or at least the chapter on alcoholism. Tell him you have been worried, though perhaps needlessly. You think he ought to know the subject better, as everyone should have a clear understanding of the risks he takes if he drinks too much. Show him you have confidence in his power to stop or moderate. Say you do not want to be a wet blanket, that you only want him to take care of his health. Thus, you may succeed in interesting him in alcoholism.
Again, we're talking about the positives. We're looking at it from, we're not looking at the negative and highlighting those times that are difficult or uncomfortable or awkward. We're trying to basically say, look, this it's for your health, it's for your involvement in the activities that we do as a family or that you do with the kids, et cetera, friends coming over. We've got a good social relationship. We have good social relationships, and in doing so, we want to keep those. It's very popular. We've got friends, we've got family. Let's keep that, and not to mention the fact that if you can control your drinking or stop, your health will thank you for it as well. And that's kind of what we're trying to talk about here. It's a good description on how to approach an alcoholic and getting them to finally talk about their alcoholism, getting them to agree that they have a problem and that they need to work on it and that they want to work on it, and doing so in a positive way gets them to the want much better and faster than if you were to tell them and accentuate the negatives. So this is all about being positive. Rob?
Yeah, be positive. Show him you have confidence in his power to stop or moderate. We're always trying to pick people up when they're down. You know, tell him that you only want him to take care of his health. Because that's what starts happening is that our health goes down very quickly. Because we don't eat, we just take in alcohol. And think about in the late 1920s during Prohibition, bathtub gin. You didn't know what you were getting a lot of times in that stuff. So, you know, the health risks, nowadays, liquor is, there's government controls on liquor, on how it's made, how it's sterilized, etc. Back then they were just making it, in bathtubs for some of the people and, getting it. So you didn't know what you were getting. People went blind with moonshine, etc. It's scary. He probably has several alcoholics among his own acquaintances. You might suggest that you both take an interest in them. Drinkers like to help other drinkers. Your husband may be willing to talk to one of them.
Yeah, so this is a definite nod to step 12. In even doing so, we're in a position where here that this person's probably hasn't read the book. They may be familiar with it. They may have read the book or the chapter on alcoholism. But going out and actually having them talk to other drinkers is going to have the positive effect in almost all cases where they're going to find themselves being able to drink less or stop drinking altogether. This is kind of it's an interesting thing that they put in here at this point because we kind of always think in terms of being kind of structured in that we've gone through all the steps, and by the time we get to our step 12, we've been through the other steps before we get there. This is kind of leaning towards basically having somebody reach out to somebody else and talking about their drinking. And in a lot of cases, that would be a positive on both ways. And drinkers like to help drinkers, and drinkers are receptive to other drinkers and that type of thing. And so the intended slash unintended outcomes of that kind of activity is going to most definitely be a positive on your spouse who is the drinker, and they're going to drink less. Rob?
Yeah, and as Leo said, nothing helps us more than helping other people. Why? Because we're selfish and self-centered, and we have to change. Okay, a spiritual experience. What they're, Dr. Young and what Dr. Silkworth were trying to do is to get us to change. How do we change? By stop thinking about ourselves 100% of the time and start thinking of what we can do for other people. Okay, how can I help Leo today? How can I help Pete? What can I do for Kicken, Linda, and all these other people, Ludi? What can I do for people today? Instead of thinking, well, what can I get from Leo today? And, hey, Kicken, you got a couple of bucks you can lend me, or a couple of dollars, a couple of euros. I got to say euros for her. And these are things that, we have to change. That's what a spiritual experience is all about, is changing our way of looking and doing at things. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes that were once the guiding force have now been cast aside, and a new set of motives and objectives have come in, and that's what it's all about, you know, and also for the wife to help, or the non-alcoholic to help other non-alcoholics where their spouse is going through the same problems that we went through. They can help where others can't. Remember Bill when he went to talk to Dr. Bob. Bill talked about his own drinking, and Dr. Bob realized this guy knows what he's talking about. Okay, so non-alcoholic can help other spouses of other alcoholics where other people can't because they understand. They know how difficult it is. It is this kind of approach does not catch your husband's interest. It may be best to drop the subject, but after a friendly talk, your husband will usually revive the topic himself. This may take patient waiting, but it will be worth it. Meanwhile, you might try to help the wife of another serious drinker. If you act upon these principles, your husband may stop or moderate.
Yeah, so I think things are kind of aligning. This couple, if you will, has a very strong relationship. They've got good communication going. They've been able to rise above the negative and the anger and the bad and work with the good. And if it doesn't necessarily catch, walk away from it for a while and not push it again. That would be detrimental. They would start to move over into the negative side of things. But trying to help another alcoholic's wife or spouse is also something that you might find rewarding and helpful. The spouse may be able to see what's going on, and whether they actually stop or moderate is probably going to be a good outcome here. I mean, we're talking about a good situation here as opposed to a bad one. So we've been able to do that, and like I said, this is an example of somebody that has a very good relationship, that has good communication skills, and are able to rise above the anger and the negative and do positive work. the other thing too is stepping away from something. Like if you don't push it, and it sometimes it'll pique that other person's interest. They'll be like, well, I wasn't really done with that. I want to come back to that, and then they circle back around like they're saying here, and bring it back up again.
Yeah, I've already talked about this. I went a little bit ahead, I guess. So I'm just going to continue reading. Suppose, however, that your husband fits the description of number two. Now, remember, number two is your husband is showing lack of control, where he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. That's husband number two. The same principles which apply to husband number one should be practiced. But after his next binge, ask him if he would really like to get over drinking for good. Do not ask that he do it for you or anyone else. Just would he like to?
Yeah, and we're talking about trying to do it for themselves. If you're getting them to doing it for somebody else is really kind of, we all probably would raise our hand and agree that that's doing it for the wrong reasons, or at least it's not doing it for the primary reason. And the primary reason should be that you want to do it for yourself and and improve things. So we're at that point where we're at the person that can't stop. They're not able to control their drinking. And after a binge, obviously, we've talked about this already, and that is that they are usually in a vulnerable and in a very willing position to talk about these type of things and want to try to correct something. So it's a good opportunity. That window is, so that door's open. You might as well walk through it and take advantage of the situation in a positive way. Again, we're still staying positive here. Nothing is negative, and we're not doing this for the wrong reasons. Huh?
Remember, the alcoholic has to want it. If they don't want it, they're not going to do it, or they're going to do what they have to do in order to keep you happy, etc. Remember the man of 30. Okay, he quit. He wanted to quit drinking until he could make $1 million. Once he made the $1 million, what did he do? Went back to drinking, and within 4 years, he was dead. 4 years. He was 54 when he made his $1 million, and he was 59 when he died. Okay, he just was willing to quit for the period of time it took him to accumulate what he wanted to accumulate. He didn't want to quit drinking. He just knew he had another goal. Once that goal was achieved, went right back to where he was. You know, the chances are he would. Show him your copy of this book and tell him what you have found out about alcoholism. Show him that as alcoholics, the writers of the book understand. Tell him some of the interesting stories you have read. If you think he will be shy of a spiritual remedy, ask him to look at the chapter on alcoholism. Then perhaps he will be interested enough to continue.
Yeah. Again, we're testing the waters. We're not pushing. We're suggesting, and if there's resistance, especially strong resistance, then we back away from it. At this point, we're just trying to get the person to understand that that there is a problem in a positive way, and then looking at it, we're getting them to start reading about alcoholism so they can learn more. And by learning more and having that knowledge, they can already start to understand better why it is that they have a problem stopping or moderating, and hopefully, again, in a positive way, they will be wanting to continue. Right?
Yep. If he is if he is enthusiastic, your cooperation will mean a great deal. If he is lukewarm or thinks he is not an alcoholic, we suggest you leave him alone. Avoid urging him to follow our program. The seed has been planted in his mind. He knows that thousands of men, much like himself, have recovered. But don't remind him of this after he has been drinking, or he may be angry. Sooner or later, you are likely to find him reading the book once more. Wait until repeated stumblings convinces him he must act, for the more you hurry him, the longer his recovery may be delayed.
Again, we're not trying to push. We're not trying to accentuate the negative. We're trying to be positive. We want to um, uh, avoid getting too pushy and desperate. And we don't want to sound desperate either. This pushing has the opposite effect. It pushes them away from the solution as opposed to the solution, and in doing so, the you lose the momentum. And what you're trying to do is really just trying to take advantage of the momentum. And if it doesn't work, just back away again. Again, there's patience that things will be better, and usually they will be. So, Rob?
Yeah, wait until repeated stumbling convinces him he must act. This is where, he's sort of hit rock bottom and, he's looking for, they're baffled. They don't know why they keep doing the same thing over and over again. How many times did I say to myself, I'm not going to have a drink today? And before I know it, you know, I'm 10:30 at night and I am way gone. You know, he knows that thousands of men, much like himself, have recovered. They no longer have the drink problem. And you know, what about in Fred's story? He was anxious to see us, you know, after stumbling. We plant the seed. We hope it takes root. If it doesn't take root, we keep moving on to the other people that need and want our help. But we plant the seed. We are always there. Okay? Please remember that. Leo, it is 12:52. Do you want to bring in Mr. Bill?
Yes, I do. Thank you for suggesting. Yep.
Hey, Bill, we can't hear you.
Yeah, hi,
There you
hi,
go.
hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Good job today. Yeah, there's a lot of real good stuff here in this chapter. I know this was written by Bill and it's written to wives, but basically what you can use this chapter for anybody that's dealing with an alcoholic, anybody that's sober that's dealing with an alcoholic, whether it's the spouse, the wife, the partner, a friend, a family member, even a sponsor. You can use the information in here when you're sponsoring somebody. So this chapter is not just to wives, it's also to somebody who would be a sponsor who's going to be working with somebody. And when we started off, this chapter gave us 4 different types of husbands, 4 different kinds of drinkers. The first one's not an alcoholic. That's a hard drinker or a heavy drinker. That's somebody that can still stop on their own when they want to, if they have a good enough reason for it. Then he gave us 3 different types of people that are alcoholics. And the second type has no control. They lose control when they're drinking. The third type is somebody that wants to stop and can't. And the fourth type is somebody that's starting to have medical problems because of their drinking. And he's just going through this and telling us that there's hope for all these different types of alcoholics. It makes no difference where you are in your alcoholism or where the person you're working with is. If they really want it and they're willing to get better and they're willing to go through this process, they can get better. And Bill's given us suggestions here. And on the top of page 111, he says the first principle of success is that you should never be angry. The first principle, he's talking about principles in this chapter. In other words, this chapter is the last part of step 12. Practice these principles in all our affairs. And he's going to give all different principles throughout here on what we're supposed to do. And he's giving advice to the person working with the alcoholic not to be angry. It doesn't say don't get angry. It says don't be angry. We're going to get angry. That's just human nature. And when we get angry, we have a way to get rid of it. And what Bill's idea was when he wrote this, he didn't just want this book to be read by alcoholics. He wanted this book to be used by anybody, people that were dealing with alcoholics, doctors, lawyers, anybody, friends of alcohol. He wanted the whole world to read this book. So he was under the impression or the mindset that the spouses or the partners of the alcoholic were going to go through this book and do the steps also. They're just like we do them as alcoholics. They were going to do them as the spouse or the partner of the alcoholic. Because Al-Anon wasn't invented yet, and Al-Anon uses the same 12 steps we use. They just change a word in it. I think they changed the first step to we're powerless over our qualifier. That's the person that qualifies them to be in Al-Anon. And if you look back on page 64, well, when it's talking about step 4 and it's giving the instruction for step 4, the third line up from the bottom, it says, we asked ourselves why we were angry. So if people went through this book, we're supposed to use step 4, and we have that sick man prayer and all these different tools that we have to get rid of our anger. So that's why we're not supposed to be angry. Being angry means you're walking around with a chip on your shoulder. You're angry all day long. It's okay to get angry, and when you get angry, we have tools in this book to get rid of the anger. Whether you're the alcoholic or the person working with the alcoholic, everybody has to get rid of their anger, because anger is contagious. And if the person that's working with the alcoholic is angry, the alcoholic is going to get angry. And when an alcoholic gets angry, we usually wind up drinking over it. That's why he's telling us, or he's telling the wives or the partners not to be angry. Again, being angry and getting angry are two different things. It's okay to get angry. That's only human. But once you get angry, you need to do something about it. You're just not supposed to be an angry person, because if you are, it's not going to work. If you're trying to help an alcoholic stay sober and you're an angry person, that's not going to work. It's going to blow up in your face and their face. And all throughout here, he gives us different principles on what we're supposed to deal with. You know, like down towards the middle of that page, it says, do not set your heart on reforming your husband. In other words, don't try to change somebody. Don't try to control somebody. Because if you do, when you do that, it usually doesn't work. And then down at the bottom of the page, it says, be sure you're not critical during such discussions. When you criticize an alcoholic, we get mad about that, and we go out and drink over that. In other words, Bill's saying, don't bust the alcoholic's chops. If you bust an alcoholic's chops, we drink over that kind of stuff. We use that as an excuse to drink. And then he tells us on page 112, around the middle of the page, it says, meanwhile, you might try to help the wife of another serious drinker. That's AA's answer for everything. Whatever you're going through, you try to help somebody else that's going through that, and that helps you get through it. Trying to help somebody else, whether you're the sober person in the relationship or even if you're the alcoholic, you try to help somebody else that's going through what you're going through, and that makes you a better person. That's what gets you spiritually fit. And that's basically what Bill is trying to say here. He's just giving some instructions or suggestions on how to work with somebody. And he goes through a lot of, he gets into a little bit of detail here, like with the 4 different types of husbands. He gets into the details of their drinking and what they did. And the one guy, he says you can't stay on the water wagon. I didn't know that's what they meant by staying on the wagon. That means you're on the water wagon. It means you're not drinking anymore. You're not drinking alcoholic beverages. So I learned something when I first went through this book. I learned what the wagon meant. It meant you're on the water wagon. And that's why they use that term, meaning that a person's not drinking. At least that's my understanding of it. And again, he's telling us all throughout here on page 113, you should not crowd him. In other words, live and let live. That's another one of our principles. And then it says, cheerfully see him through more sprees. I know that's almost impossible for somebody to do, but the reason that he's saying that, if you jump in an alcoholic's face, they're probably going to get drunk over it. You know, if you want an alcoholic to do something, tell them they're not allowed to do it. That's just the way we are, especially an alcoholic that's active. And if the person that's working with the alcoholic says to them, you're not allowed to drink anymore, the alcoholic's probably going to drink. That's just what we do. We do the opposite of what we're told to do. So Bill's just trying to give some suggestions here, some ways on what you can do to help an alcoholic stay sober, because that's basically what the book is about. That's pretty much all I got. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, we'll close with the Serenity Prayer, Rob, and then open things up a little bit.
Sounds great. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.